When it comes to comics, condition is everything. And if you buy or sell comics, it's useful to have at least a working knowledge on how to grade them yourself. I mean, sure, most people can spot a low-grade comic in a lineup. But it's not so easy when the book's defects are a little less obvious. And the difference between a fine and a very fine comic can cost you big in the aftermarket. Today we're going to get hands-on and walk through the grading process together by examining a comic from my personal collection. So pull up a chair and put your phone on silent, because class is about to begin. I'm Mark, and this is Comic Book Revival. Welcome back. So what is comic book grading? Basically, it's a process of examining a comic book and assessing its condition based on its flaws, defects, or lack thereof. Professional graders use a 10-point grading system, which breaks down further into 25 individual different grade points. Here's what that looks like. If we zoom in a little bit closer, the grading criteria looks a little bit like this. Now, I'm going to go through these pretty quickly, so you might want to grab onto something and try not to blink. Gem Mint. Comics at this grade are extremely rare. They need to be nearly perfect in every way. No obvious defects allowed. Near Mint to Mint. Just a step down from Gem Mint, these books allow only a very few subtle flaws. Near Mint Plus, Near Mint Minus. As the name implies, near mint comics must be nearly perfect. Very fine, near mint. This grade acts as a kind of bridge between near mint and very fine when needed. Very fine plus, very fine minus. Very fine comics are in outstanding condition with excellent eye appeal. Fine, very fine. Another bridge grade, connecting the high end of fine with the low end of very fine. Fine. At the fine grade point and lower, more defects are allowed. Fine books are above average copies that show minor wear, but are clean with decent eye appeal. Very good, fine. Another in-between grade for those comics that are better than fine plus, but not quite very fine. Very good plus, very good minus. At the very good level, these are average used copies with significant wear. Good, very good. Another bridge grade. At this grade and lower, books are starting to become less desirable to collect and own due to their many defects. Good plus, good minus. These are used copies with substantial wear, but still complete and intact. Overall look is usually rough. Be aware that the grading term good is a bit misleading, as it gives a better impression than intended. Keep this in mind when buying. Fair, good. This is the last bridge grade, and these are used copies with heavy wear, but still complete at this grade point. Fair. Very heavy wear. Poor. Heavily used copy and may be incomplete. So that's all well and good, but why grade your comics? Why even bother? For one thing, it'll make you more aware of defects, what they look like, and how to spot them. Have you ever bought a car that you've never seen on the road before? And then as soon as you get yours, you're spotting them everywhere? Same idea. But probably most importantly is grading is the most accurate method to assign value to your comics. And grading isn't just for sellers. When you know what to look for, you'll be able to make much better buying choices as well. And finally, how do we grade comics? Grading comics sounds pretty technical, doesn't it? The truth of the matter is, it's far from an exact science. There's actually a lot of subjectivity when it comes to grading. We're all human. We see things differently. We interpret things differently. Grading is just as much an art form as it is a science. The grading method I'm going to share with you today is the method that I've been using personally for several years now, tweaking it and refining it as I go. It's simple, it's efficient, and it works. So we've got the standards set by the pros and the real-world criteria that collectors agree on. I like to think of my system as a comprehensive hybrid of both. By no means is this the only way to grade comics. It's simply my way. I'll leave it up to you to decide whether you agree with it or not. Either way, I encourage you to share your thoughts in the comments below. Okay, so let's get at it. I've chosen a mid-grade comic for us to look at today. They're usually a little more challenging to grade because they often contain many different defects. The comic we're grading is Aquaman 35. It's a Silver Age and it's a key, so it holds a little bit of value. Okay, so before we start, we need to make sure we have a clean space to work on, good lighting, a ruler in case we need to measure any tears or stains or creases. I also use a checklist that I've created to make sure I don't forget anything. And we need to make sure that we thoroughly wash and dry our hands. So once we've got all that, we're ready to start grading our comic. Okay, so here we are. Let's grade this comic. I'm going to move my checklist and my ruler and my pen off to the side. Okay, so today we're looking at Aquaman number 35. It was published by DC Comics in 1967, and this is a Silver Age key. This comic is the first appearance of this guy right here, Black Manta. He's basically the arch nemesis of Aquaman, and he's a pretty badass character. He's actually one of my favorite DC villains, which is why I bought this comic. And if we can take a moment to just detour from grading just for a second, can we all just admire this amazing cover artwork? This is by the late, great Nick Cardy. He was responsible for covers for the first 56 issues of Aquaman, and he pulled double duty as the interior artist for the first 39 of them. He had done some other work for DC, like on Teen Titans, for example, but I personally think his contribution to Aquaman is his best stuff. His style was so unique and dynamic. I highly recommend you check out some of his other Aquaman covers, even if you just Google them. Just look them up and take a quick look. It'll be worth your while. But anyways, back on track. The first thing we're going to do is examine the front cover. And what I usually like to do is I start with the corners. So we're looking for damage, right? We're looking for things like bends, creases, tears. Even the sharpness of the corners comes into play when you're grading. And these aren't bad. They're definitely not sharp, but they're not rounded either. I would call these medium blunt. Just going to write that down quick. And it looks like we have a small tear on the top cover. So I'll get my ruler out, take a closer look. It looks to be about a ½ inch. And I don't know if it shows on camera or not, but there is a very slight crease on the bottom cover. It's a little easier to see on the back. And take a closer look and see. Yeah, it's more of a wrinkle than a crease, but I'm going to write it down anyways. And it looks like this is about a ½ inch. It's always hard to measure something that's not straight, but we do the best we can. And that leaves the spine. What do we look for on the spine? Well, there's a few things. First of all, the staples are important. And these ones look pretty good, but sometimes the staples will be rusted, they'll be loose, they'll be misaligned. Those are the sorts of things you want to look for. And as I said, these ones look pretty good, especially for a book of this age. I don't see any rust. They're holding pretty tight, and they're straight. Those are all very good things to have in a Silver Age book. The cover itself is well aligned. It's straight. It doesn't appear to be off-center or crooked in any way. There is a little bit of a spine roll. You see how it's not laying perfectly flat? It's got a little bit of lift to it. Well, that's called a spine roll. That usually comes from improper storage or, stacking a bunch of books up without boards underneath them to keep the books flat. And it's another common thing you see a lot in older books. And this actually isn't a bad spine roll. It's pretty minor, but nevertheless, we have to write it down. It's definitely going to have an impact on the overall grade. And just going back to the staples for a second, the other thing you want to look for are stress marks. You can kind of see a couple here. There's a few above the staples. There's a few right at the staples where they attach to the paper. And these are kind of problematic, but if they don't break color, they're not as big a deal. Color breaking spine ticks are a big problem with assigning a grade to a book. And I will say the mid to low grades allow for some bindery defects, but not the higher grades. So if you have a book with color breaking spine ticks, splits in the spine, loose, misaligned staples, Those are all bindery defects, and those are things that will prevent a book from grading high, even if everything else about it is great. The surface of the cover is a little worn, probably just from handling. Nothing too serious. When I run my hand across the surface, it feels smooth. I'm not picking up any dirt. It's got some wear. It's a little faded, but honestly, there's still a little bit of gloss to it when you hold it up to the light the right way. Not bad for a 50-plus-year-old book. I've seen a lot worse. Okay, so this is kind of interesting. Writing on covers is quite common on these older comics. However, there is one exception. You see this little bit of black ink at the top here? It's kind of faded, but hopefully the camera picks it up. This is a date stamp, and these were very common back in the day. Vendors would receive their comics at their newsstands or drugstores or wherever they sold them, and they would slap a date on the cover of the comic as a reminder to them as to when it arrived. And it was usually an ink stamp like this, or sometimes it would be done in very fine handwriting. But they did this so that if they had leftover comics that didn't sell after a period of time, like say a month, they could pull those books and send them back to the publisher for credit. Now, I might be wrong about this. If I am, someone please correct me, but I don't believe date stamps go against the comic's grade, except maybe in the really high range, like near mint or mint. But in fact, many collectors look for books with date stamps. And I can see why. They're kind of cool to own. It gives the book a backstory. It gives the book a sense of history and pedigree. So this particular stamp reads 6/28. So I'm going to take that to mean it was received on June 28th. Now, if this was scribbling or just random handwriting and just, say it covered a good chunk of the artwork and it was something that decreased the book's eye appeal, then it would definitely hinder the grade somewhat. But even in that case, it's up to the interpretation of the grader as to how much it should affect the grade. This is where that line blurs and grading becomes more opinion-based than science. Okay, let's go inside and open it up. What are we looking for on the interior pages? First of all, page color and paper quality are both very important. As comics age, the paper becomes darker. This progresses as an off-white, and then cream or tan, and eventually brownish. I would consider this comic to be at the off-white, maybe cream stage. As you can see, the paper quality is pretty soft. It's flexible. It's got a lot of give. There's no brittleness. I love this panel layout. It's so engaging and dynamic and fun to read. Another thing you want to keep an eye out for is staining or water damage. I don't see any in this book, but we'll keep an eye out for it. And we're also looking for things like more writing, signs of restoration like color touch-ups or tape. We're going to check the edges of the pages for tears. And another thing, make sure you take your time as you're grading the book. There's nothing to gain by rushing through it. In fact, I usually read the comics as I'm grading them because, you've got it open in front of you, so why not? Okay, we're at the centerfold now. This is a good place to check the staples again. As I mentioned earlier, the staples look pretty good. They're tight. I don't see any rust. Rusted staples will eventually cause a migration stain onto the paper, which leaves a brown mark, and I don't see any of that here. Okay, it looks like we have another tear here. Right at the bottom of this page. I'm going to get my ruler out. Try to measure it without making it any worse. Okay, I'm going to say that's 3/8 of an inch. Okay, that's it for the interior of the comic. The inside of the back cover appears nice and clean. A little bit of foxing around the edges here. Very faint. What this is basically an age-related discoloration of the paper. It's inevitable in a lot of these older comics. And we're going to flip it over and check out the back cover. Okay, so the first thing that sticks out obviously is this pen mark at the top. It could either be a scribble or, I don't know, it almost looks like the number 4 or a Y. There's also some wear, just like the front of the cover. And I don't know, it almost looks like soiling, but I have a feeling this is just some residual ink that's left from the printing process. And one last thing to consider, just the overall presentation of the comic. And the overall eye appeal is good. The few defects that are present aren't off-putting or distracting, and even though, despite a bit of fading, the cover still has some life in it. Okay, so once you've got your notes, the next step is to compare the defects to the grading scale. And what I like to do is I take each of these notes individually and I find the defect as it is best represented in the scale. I always start at the top of the grading scale and I work my way down as I search for the book's defects. My reasoning for this is that every comic starts off in mint condition as it comes off the printing press, right? Every book is mint. So I start looking in mint and I work my way down until I find each of these defects. When I find the flaw on the grading scale, I note the condition that it corresponds to. So for example, we have a crease on the bottom corner of the book. It's a 1/4 inch and it's allowed in the near mint grade. Sorry, near mint minus. So over here, I'm going to write near mint minus. And I'll continue to do this all the way down until each of these defects has a corresponding grade.
A few minutes later.
Okay, so I took the liberty of finding all of these and making note of them off camera just to speed up the process a little bit. And these are all the defects I found. Quite a few of them were under the very fine minus category. But there was also some in the fine plus range. Here's the thing you have to keep in mind. You can only grade the book as high as its worst defect. If the book has flaws only found in lower grades, the condition can't go up from there. So, in our case, the good but not great eye appeal and blunted corners, where are the blunted corners? Up here, are enough to put this book in the fine to fine plus range. If I were to sell this book, I would probably give it a fine, although fine plus isn't too far out of the realm of possibility either. Now you might notice on my checklist, I left the pen on the back cover blank. The reason for that is because there really doesn't seem to be a definitive correct response to writing on a comic. I've searched message boards, I've asked other collectors, I've done all the due diligence that I can on this, and it appears that this is one of those things that is up for interpretation. And I'm curious, as my apprentice grader, I want to know what you would do about it. So there's 2 ways you can handle something like this. Using your judgment and what you already know about this book's condition, would you A, choose to give the book a free pass on the writing? I mean, after all, it's a small, unobtrusive mark on the back cover, and it doesn't affect the story in any way. It doesn't reduce the book's eye appeal, and it doesn't compromise the integrity of the book. Or B, you can count it as a flaw and penalize the book. This might look like simply docking a grading point, just to say that you've acknowledged it as a defect, and that would put the book at a fine minus. Personally, I opted for A, but that's just my opinion and my interpretation. Let me know what you would do in the comments below. How would you have handled the writing on the back cover. There you have it. By the way, I'm including downloadable copies of my grading scale and my grading checklist. You should be able to find them in the video description below. Try them out by grading a couple of comics from your own collection and let me know how you make out. That was a relatively basic introduction to grading comics. And remember, once you've determined your comic's condition, it's that much easier to price it out with confidence and accuracy. And we'll be covering pricing comics in my next video. And despite my best efforts, I'm sure I forgot something. So please leave a comment below with any questions or concerns. Or you can message me on Instagram. You can find me there at oldmanyoung. That's oldmanyoung with a 0, not an O. Thank you so much for watching and your continued support. I couldn't do this without you. We'll see you next time. Bye.